Leading political issues and headlines. Still joined in studio by political philosopher Dr. Tshepo Moloi. And Dr. Moloi, I want to come back to a point you raised before the break, which was about leadership in a time of crisis. So you were saying the state has, for instance, a unit within DIRCO that is able to deal with issues of public policy, what the state is doing, etc., but we're not using it. And, you know, it's a cliche, but often we speak about how the real test of leadership is in a time of crisis. And I think we can agree this is some class of crisis, certainly internally. And there's a question about how well our leaders are prepared to deal with that crisis across the board, from policing, social development, economic development, the presidency, GCIS, the government has a whole communications and informations unit. But it doesn't seem like there is a coordinated effort to deal with the crises. You almost imagine there is no war room. There's no one sitting with everyone involved saying, okay, this is how we address this. So how well prepared are we for crisis? Do we have that kind of leadership?
Okay, so I think we just need to remind ourselves that we are living in an era where, mainstream politics and partisan politics really, operates on a deployment strategy, right? So the people that we are assuming now are leaders are nothing more than deployees, right? From their respective political parties. So in this instance, the ruling party of the day being ANC, we know that we're not going to forget that we just come from Nazareth. You know, the internal wars that have been happening there are still, basically still fresh. And we're talking about Proud now. I mean, we need to note that Naledi Pandor only comes into the position. She has less than about 3 months, and she's still getting, to find her way in the ministry. So you are not getting really what you would assume should be what is happening from the so-called plenipotentiaries of the department.
And so then at that point, if you apply even just philosophical thinking, then it becomes evident that the government we have in place is not the right government for us right now. What else can be done then to make sure we get the right people in place, right?
So that's interesting. I mean, is there ever the right government? I mean, given the rules that I play in mainstream politics. For example, now we're in Africa, and all our rules, none of them are really African, including our laws, right? I mean, we still operate in a Roman Dutch law template. So we still need to get to a point where we want to say to ourselves, how do we begin to redefine in order to be relevant to who we are? And we're far from that. And that, of course, it becomes now an academic conversation. It becomes, and the people that you're talking about now would definitely not qualify to even participate in it, given that, like I'm saying, most of them are deployees. They don't even qualify to be sitting in those portfolios.
And they've demonstrated a lack of understanding, especially of some of the most complex issues which we're now faced with, right?
Look, part of that, of course, is we're not in an island, right? So, for example, I mean, part of the reason that we can't be so decisive in acting on the protests that are happening now is precisely because of our bilateral relationships we have with the other countries that are involved, right? So we can't really move on Zimbabweans or Nigerians in the way that ideally the public would expect a government to, precisely because of what we have, which is very sensitive in terms of business, in terms of the other relations that we have in terms of our agreements. So,
but also our law enforcement, the ones who would need to do the moving, are also quite compromised.
Right.
So we know, for instance, one of the big issues with SAPS is criminals within the ranks of SAPS. We know the complicit nature of people from immigration, customs, SAPS in, all kinds of crime, right? So even the people who were to then move, some of them are involved, they are implicated. So how then would a state even respond when your response team is not 100%?
Yeah. Look, I think you have a serious problem in terms of the deployees being compromised in the various structures in which they're serving. This is something that sadly we are not going to be able to solve this with the ruling government still having the kind of internal battles they have within its own organization. But my worry now begins to be more people are going to get hurt. We're not yet seeing any arrests happening in terms of even the very political leaders who are implicated in most of high-ranked cases that are affecting even to the point of our economy, right? So what is urgent at this point for me is we need to arrest the unrest that we see now going on. And the only way I think government can do this is what I was raising right at the beginning. We need to start to activate the purpose of trial. And then we can take it from there, because the silence from leadership is really in itself a crisis.
That's Mulo. Thank you very much for joining us. I say we need to leave it right now. We need to move over